Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a new season of Unemployed Millennial Podcast. I've kind of just decided that I want to try out doing different seasons because I think it'll kind of act as a thesis. I have so many different interests and topics that I want to explore, which can be kind of overwhelming. So it's not going to be like a hard press. We have to talk about whatever. I think it'll just be kind of a recurring theme. And this season's podcast topic is going to be on feminine and masculine energies. And I really could not have asked for a more perfect first guest to explore this topic than my guest today, and that is Megan Klein. Megan was the first person I have ever heard talk about operating her company with feminine energy. That's actually one of the 4 pillars for how she operates her company, Little Saints, which is a non-alcoholic mocktail company. I actually met Megan at Summit Series in Palm Desert, and I tried her drinks, her mocktails, for the first time at Summit. I tried them because one of the attendees there, whose name is Alex, just came up to us and was like, have you tried these drinks? They're incredible. And they were incredible. I admire that she talks about her beliefs, but she is also very open and vulnerable about her shortcomings as well. As creators, as she talks about in this podcast episode, we are always going to run into problems or mess up, and the thing that we can do is just move forward in operating from a love space. Something that I found was really interesting that she said is that she believed that entrepreneurs are actually a channel and a way to affect change in this world. It is really becoming the change that you want to see in the world. And it's kind of just creating the change with the product or service that you want to see in the world. Alcohol is extremely damaging. It is the most socially acceptable drug that we use, which I think my generation, I'm a late millennial, the last millennial, and Gen Z is starting to realize. I think a lot of people are becoming very sober curious. At the end of this podcast episode, I actually told her that it's one of my goals to work with her in some capacity and work with Little Saints somehow. And she actually created an affiliate or a discount code for my viewers, the listeners of Unemployed Millennial Podcast. So if you use UM20, you can get 20% off your order of Little Saints. Most of their sales actually come from e-commerce. So if you are interested, definitely check it out. Check out their website and use 20 for 20% off your order. I actually just bought my sister some of their products, all of their products that were not sold out, because my sister was actually looking for non-alcoholic drink substitutes, and I was like, this would literally be perfect for her. I actually usually do a sober month a year, and I did one in January where I don't drink any alcohol. This has actually inspired me to do another one for the summer, because I never do them in the summer. I feel like summer is peak, like go out, enjoy yourself drinking time. So as of the 22nd of June, I am doing a dry June into July month for summer, which I've never done before. So I'm excited to see how that goes. And I will definitely be purchasing some Little Saints products of my own using the code 20. So shout out to Megan for making that happen. And let's get into this podcast episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Unemployed Millennial Podcast. Today I have Megan Klein as my guest. And I will actually have to say, you are literally the number 1 person on my dream podcast list. So I met you at Summit, and I was
Palm Springs, November 2022.
Yeah, an incredible experience. And you are the founder of Little Saints, and we have the drinks on display here, which we will also talk about. You are really the first founder that I've ever heard talk about integrating feminine energy and spirituality in your leading a company. So if my podcast ends today, I'll be happy, because you're literally at the top. I'm not even kidding. So thank you for coming. Thank you for making the time.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
We've been trying to schedule this for a while. I'm so grateful that
I
now's the
perfectly
time.
caught you.
Yeah.
Okay, so you started working at a really young age. You said that you just always loved to work, which I can relate to. You fried mozzarella sticks, you've done flower arrangements, you've worked at clothing stores, and you were a French and English major.
Gosh, you're good. Yes.
I have this all So you went into law.
I
Is that correct?
Yeah, it makes no sense. But I was French and English major, and I don't know. I didn't know what I was going to do with that. And so right after I graduated college, I was working at Milwaukee Magazine doing like some writing. I was working at a clothing store on weekends, and I was a paralegal. And I was living at my parents' house in Wisconsin. And then I wanted to move to New York. I went to school in Boston. I wanted to be with all my friends. So I basically just took the only job. It was a lucky job, but I took the job that I got, which was a paralegal at a friend of my boss in Milwaukee in New York. And so I moved to New York, and then I just got on the law train, and I wouldn't say it was one that I really did intentionally. Now I'm all about doing things intentionally. I just kind of was like, ooh, this is something that I can make enough money to live in New York with. And then once I was there, kind of my whole community was applying to law school. So I applied to law school and just sort of went blindly there.
In one of your podcast episodes, you said that you didn't really find your passion until like 30 to 35. What point was that?
I've always loved plants and considered myself like an environmentalist through the lens of like loving plants and like doing what I can to like spread love for the earth. And so when I went to law school, I didn't really know what that meant. Like I'm always like reading about environmental books, and my mom's like also a big tree hugger, and so I just like love like being outside, and I would do kind of like environmental volunteering that we all try to do. And so I went to law school, and then I went and worked at a big firm in New York, and I had no idea what it was to be like an environmental lawyer, and I thought being in an energy practice, which was like wind and ethanol cases, was the same thing as being an environmentalist. So I just had no idea what I was doing. So once I got into the law firm, I was doing wind and ethanol cases, and then I was doing bankruptcy litigation, and I felt like I was just contributing to like the demise of the earth. Like it was just didn't feel right in my body, because we'll be talking about intuition today. So I quit my job without a job in the summer of 2009, which was right after kind of Lehman Brothers crashed and everyone was getting fired. So when I quit, because lawyers doing litigation were in high demand, so my bosses were like, "What are you doing?" And I really wanted to get into like environmental work, so I quit that summer. I volunteered at a rooftop farm in Brooklyn, and I worked for the League of Conservation Voters, which like helps voters decide who to vote for if they just want to vote on environmental issues. And then I got a job at Earth Justice. So there's like a fellowship program that's a 2-year program, and so I worked there.
And you said, I think for Earth Justice, that you kind of stalked like.
Oh, yeah, no, I've stalked everyone. When I was getting jobs rather than starting companies, I was just always like, I'm going to get this. So Earth Justice, like I got on their mailing list. I won a ticket to a film screening. I went to the film screening, and then I like met the woman that would become my boss. So she knew that I was like really engaged, and I just followed up. I wrote them a bunch of articles. And so I was on the team. I was really lucky. I was on the team that helped, keep unsafe fracking out of New York State. We worked on coal plant cases, and I helped start the factory farm practice there.
Wow. How does one stalk in a way that is so effective?
I would call it a full court press approach, but also being like chilled. I'm sure you do too. You get like a million sales emails, and
I feel like I did that to you a little bit.
Yeah, no, I loved it, but you did it in a good way, because it wasn't like you'll get some emails like, "Oh, I guess I'm not a priority to you." It's just like everyone's busy, and so you just follow up like on a regular basis. And I think if your intention is like, I think I can serve you, I think I can be helpful here, that comes through. If the intention is like, I want your business, or like it's like if the intention is kind of like money focused or some other focus that doesn't feel like good to you, then I think that's when it doesn't work.
Okay, so how did you come about Little Saints?
So Little Saints is my third plant-based entrepreneurial company. So after I did Earth Justice, I love Earth Justice, a nonprofit environmental law firm. It used to be the law firm of the Sierra Club, and then it branched out onto its own. I love what they do, but fighting is not my nature. And so I believe that the best way to inspire change, in my opinion, or the way I can serve people, is through creating products. And so I wanted to start creating products that would inspire people to make small incremental changes that would help the earth. So my first like, it was really hard also for me to get out of being a lawyer. You know, when you're in one career, you're like, oh my God, I have no other skills. And so that's how I was feeling when so I'm 44, and I was a lawyer full-time until I was 33. I started my own little law firm, and then I really wanted to work for Farmed Here. And Farmed Here was the one-time largest vertical farm in the country. It was in Chicago, where I had moved in 2012, and they grew basil and microgreens in a big warehouse indoors. And I'd read this book called The Vertical Farm by a Columbia professor. I stalked him. He talked to me, and I said, I really want to get into this industry. And he said, well, there's this company in Chicago doing really cool things. So I would like regularly write into their info at just being like, either I love you guys or I'm doing this. Can I help you? Usually, you know, it's like, can I help you?
Right.
Is the way that I stalk people.
Yeah.
So I kept saying, you know, like, I'm a lawyer. I was helping do like a bunch of urban farming kind of permit law in Chicago at that time, and I was helping other urban farmers. So I would reach out.
And it sounds like you often offer to do things for free, like pro bono, when you're in the stalking phase.
Yes, I do.
Yeah,
I do. And a lot of people, that's a little bit controversial now, especially for women, because we tend to give kind of away too much, or at least more than men, in my experience. Mm-hmm. But I do, when I'm building a relationship, of course, especially if it looks from the outside like I don't really have anything to offer. You know, at that time, I didn't have any business experience. So I was like, I want to like help you grow. And so the way I finally got a hold of them was because I had been an environmental lawyer, so I had policy writing experience. And so I got sponsored to write, this is such a wonky thing to talk about, but for the Food Safety Modernization Act, which is just like a law created by FDA, there was a section in there about how they were going to regulate indoor farmers. And so I wrote comments on behalf of the hydroponics and aquaponics industry about how the FDA could protect their interests. And so I got sponsored by someone else, by the Walton Family Foundation, actually, because they're really passionate about many things, including aquaponics and indoor farming. And so I was getting different farms to sign on to the comments. So finally, I sent them to Farmed Here, which is where I really wanted to work. And the only ask was like, I would love for you to sign on to these. And I also would love to know if I missed anything, like if there's anything that you would like to get in to these comments. And I think they did give me like one suggestion that I hadn't thought of, put them into the comments, and then they signed on. So then I was on their radar as someone that could be of a value added to them, not like a pain in the butt. And so then when they were having some legal troubles, they called me up and they were like, you've said you want to help. Will you help? And so that's how I got on board. So I started helping them with little legal things, and then I was really interested. I would like get to go to this beautiful farm, and it smells amazing. Like indoor basil has like more oils on it. And so it just like the basil smells incredible. And I just tried to make myself indispensable. And I worked and of course I have to admit, you can only do this if you have a side hustle or if you have savings. Yeah. So I was still doing my own law practice on the side, and I had some savings from working at the big firms in New York. So I worked for no cash and equity only for the first 6 months. Wow. And that's how I got out of being a full-time lawyer, and that was my first time in business.
I think that's a really interesting point, because even in YouTube, there are people who want to kind of switch their content, and there's just kind of a period of time where you're in a limbo, or it's just like not working. And I guess as a full-time like lawyer, it would be you're not earning as much as you would in your other career, but there is always that transition point. You mentioned in one of your podcasts that you believe that you can become the change by starting a company and like just operating that company based on like what you want to see, because what you're doing is you're observing everything in the collective and seeing what's missing, and then you're just doing it. At what point in your career did you kind of start listening or engaging like the feminine energy that you talked about?
That's an interesting question. I guess I was mentioning so much stuff about Farmed Here because that was my first time in business, and all of my business partners were men. And all of my business partners, and I love men, by the way, this is not like it, but, and then all my business partners in my next company, which is Field and Farmer, which was the first company that I founded, it's salad dressings, dips, and juices that are plant-based. All of my business partners were men too, and they had banking and backgrounds in industries where like analytics is king. So that was my initiation into business, was that every intuition had to be backed by intuition, which is feminine energy, had to be backed up by data, which is masculine energy. And there wasn't a lot of room for, well, there's no data to support my intuition, but like I am the one out in the field. Like I am the one like living and breathing these products. Like I want to bring my intuition in this. And it was sort of a constant battle with us because their background and training was very much data-based. And I started just feeling and seeing and knowing that when you are in, especially in an emerging industry, which I would assume like being a creator on YouTube is, and like in the plant-based food industry from 2017 to 2020, and now in the industry that I am in, which is non-alcoholic beverages, these are emerging categories, and there's not always data or masculine energy to back it up. And so it was at Field and Farmer so the specific that we were doing was local food was one of the fastest growing categories in food in like 2015, 2016. And there wasn't a lot of data to show like what local meant to people or why people cared about it. And, I was doing demos in grocery stores all the time. Like I love to get to know our customer. And I think that's what I think that's the role of an entrepreneur, is to like talk to as many people as you can. And we are the channel for kind of what you were saying before, but we are the channel to create something that's already in the collective. So we're listening to people and we're like hearing what they want. And then we are thinking like, okay, how can I serve the collective in a way that's going to bring a product to life that people want that's not already out there? So I don't think that being an entrepreneur is your own like, oh, I'm a genius and I'm going to do this. I think it's, listening to what's out there and creating something new. And so when and that's what I was trying to bring into Field and Farmer, and it's still on shelves. It's the most beautiful brand. Like I still have it all the time, but I had sort of just a difference in philosophy with my other co-founders that wanted everything to be data-based. And so then I decided, I was like, okay, I know that I'm an unconventional business person. And so actually what I did was I was like, I'm going to create my own company. But this is funny because I'm all about feminine energy and intuition, but I actually went to business school.
Yeah. When
I was 40. So I sat in so many fundraising meetings and I thought, well, I can't get people to listen to me. Like maybe I'm not smart enough, which was not true. But so I went to Kellogg. I got my executive MBA at Kellogg, and that was all like, data. But I actually learned from a business perspective, like when you are supposed to use your intuition. And it's exactly what my intuition was telling me, which is when there's no data to support like what you're doing. And like sometimes it doesn't have to all be data, or else we would all be robots.
Yeah.
And like no innovation would come out. So then I started really studying, like I thought I was going to go to business school and like get good at Excel. I'm like probably worse because now I know like what I'm supposed to be doing. But I really learned that, how to foster my own creativity and how to lean into my strength, which is like kind of being a channel and leaning into my intuition and putting that into a product. I just like learned the structure for it.
Okay. I really love that because as a YouTuber, like I'll be on YouTube for like 11 years next month. And a lot of the time I notice that a lot of guys are very data driven, and that's just not something that is my strength, even though there's like endless data. But there have been times where I've been really ahead of trends, and it's just me following my intuition or me finding out what I would want to see and then just creating that. And I'm not always able to capitalize on the trends because I'm like a little too early. But what point? Because for me, I'm just kind of like, oh, I think that I should just keep doing this, keep listening. Like for me right now, it's like, oh, I want to talk about feminine energy and intuition because I think the world will need that because post-pandemic people are like depressed. They're drinking more alcohol. Also, we can open these because...
Oh, yeah. You haven't tried that. Let's try
I haven't tried. I would love to try
spirit.
it.
Okay,
yeah.
So everyone, it's 10 in the morning, and we're going to have a mezcal alternative. This is non-alcoholic.
Yeah.
So this is the problem I wanted to solve was, so I don't drink anymore. It's been 9 months without alcohol.
And that's amazing because I think was at Summit, you were like either starting this or maybe you had already
Yes,
just
I was
started.
Actually 2 months into not drinking when we met.
I have a statistic, and I think about this a lot because... I don't know. I think a lot about health and wellness, and I think post-pandemic, according to Harvard Health, during the pandemic, women have increased their heavy drinking days by 41% compared to before the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Additional research has shown that the psychological stress related to COVID-19 was associated with greater drinking for women, but not for men.
Yeah, yes.
So I have a history of alcoholism in my family, and I tried my first sober January in 2020. And then I know that you tried your first sober January in 2021. And how did that go?
So actually, it was the first successful.
Okay, right.
I tried dry January many, many times. Should we take a cheers?
Yeah.
Cheers, Annemarie.
Thank you, Megan.
Okay, so
That is delicious. Oh my gosh. There are so many flavors on that too. You can feel it on your tongue.
yeah.
Can we describe? Okay, we're kind of jumping all over
Yeah,
the
we're
place.
jumping, but we'll go back to the dry January. But
Yeah.
actually, we can kind of tie it in. So
Okay.
when I did dry January 2021, the first one that was successful because I had tried it, probably 10 times and failed. Like I would get in a week or 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, and then be like, I've done enough. And then I would like go out and like get drunk and kind of negate the whole thing. And a lot of it was because like I like the ritual of drinking, and I like drinking that something that does not taste like something I'm drinking during the day, even though we're having this in the morning. Like I wanted, if sparkling water is here and a cocktail is here, I tried everything. In January 2021, I bought everything that was out there, and I thought that everything was like way closer to sparkling water in terms of taste and smell, and I wanted something that was like very close to a cocktail.
This is like absolutely delicious. Like you can taste it in the back of your throat, and it's still there. Like the notes.
You get that from the capsicum, which is the spicy component of peppers. So it was really important. So it has if you can smell it, like it has a smell. That's one of the reasons we all go back to alcohol. It's because we like this, the terpenes, which are like the smell molecules that lift your mood. It's like in wine and beer, it's in all alcohols. But a lot of non-alcoholic drinks don't have a smell to them. So you subconsciously don't feel like you're having a cocktail experience because there's no smell.
Okay.
And then also this has lion's mane mushroom in it, which is just a functional mushroom that kind of like activates your brain neurons. So it turns your brain on rather than turning your brain off like alcohol does. So dry January 2021, I tried everything out there. Like my whole kitchen table was full of everything possible. And like I said, nothing fooled me. And then, at that point, I've been creating products for about 5 years, and I'm really into, like, I have like a little witchy, like alchemist kitchen in my kitchen, and I have all the powders and everything. And I knew, I use, reishi mushroom and lion's mane mushroom every day in my coffee. And I use like CBD in my coffee, and I like have all these kind of potions. And I knew that I could make a new kind of next level non-alcoholic alternative that would taste way closer to a cocktail and have a good mood effect.
What point do you feel that you are confident in operating your business with the feminine energy?
That was part of the DNA of Little Saints, and that was something that really motivated me to do this, because I felt like that's what I was craving with my last business. And I know that not many people do it. So I just, Little Saints has 4 values. Like I created those values before I created the company. And that was like to celebrate fun and play, to celebrate feminine energy, to like be a good steward of like the environment, and to give back.
Okay. And can you differentiate what feminine energy and masculine energy means to you?
Yes. So feminine energy would be trusting the way that you feel in your body, trusting your intuition, and leading, kind of heart-centered leadership, right? So I mean, all leaders care about their teams, but I'll say like I love you, like I will like share emotions with the people on my team, and just every day just recognize that people have emotions too, and like really put that at the forefront and encourage people to trust their own intuition. Masculine energy is something we also need. We need both. This is not like a one or the other. Like masculine energy is data, it's numbers, it's like looking at your P&L and seeing what we need to change. It's sales, it's like logic and rational thinking. And so, during the pandemic, we really swayed very far into masculine energy, because it was all rules, all data, all like, we were supposed
like as a collective.
As a collective.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Think about it, because it was just like all like people telling us what to do based on.
Fascinating.
data. And also, it's so we are, so I, you know me, so you know that I'm really into astrology, and I have a money astrologer, Jen Hirsch, Soulful Wealth. And she, used to be a, economist at Goldman Sachs. And then she had a brain injury, and like it kind of opened up her gift. And so she says literally everything that she says is right. So I work with her as my guide, and she says that, this past cycle has been really like masculine energy dominant. And in 2024, we are moving into the age of the divine feminine, where we start to honor our intuition and our feelings again. And we all start to like lead with our hearts, much, as much as our minds.
Wow, that gives me goosebumps, because I feel that personally for me, but obviously I don't know. And again, you're just like the first person I've ever heard like talk this openly about this. Even in some of your previous podcasts, you describe something and you're like, oh, it's kind of woo. And that's how I feel, where I just kind of won't even talk about it except to like my sister. You told me earlier that well, obviously you're very spiritual. I guess 2 questions. Where did that start? Like, have you always been spiritual, or is this something you've discovered? And then can you tell me the 5 layers of spirituality that you were talking about? Or
earlier. Yes. Okay. So I, when I was in my 20s, I had a lot of health problems that led me to spirituality. So it was not I went to Catholic school, and I like had zero relation to it. I mean, we used to I went to Divine Savior Holy Angels High School, and like I would steal the nuns' church wine. I mean, it was like the opposite of a religious spiritual person. And then in my 20s, I got diagnosed with fibromyalgia, which is like, I had chronic, horrible back pain, even though I was just 24. And I had to carry around a back pillow. Like I couldn't fly more than 3 hours because my back would be in screaming pain. And it was just like this terrible cycle it was about 3 years that my back was never not in pain. And so at first I went to Western medicine, masculine energy data, and I was like going to the doctor and taking painkillers and taking muscle relaxers, and none of those things were working. And I felt like I was getting farther and farther away from like my actual like trusting my own body. And then in the end, none of those things worked. I just started reading books on health and inflammation, and mindset was finally what changed it. So I had to do a lot of my own work on that. And that was kind of the first like little thing that got me into health, but I didn't learn my lesson, and I was like partying my face off and still not like eating that well. So then in my young 30s, I had gastritis, which was just like basically stomach inflammation, for another 2 years. And I did the whole thing again. I went to doctors, I went to acupuncture, and nothing worked. And of course, it was just like a mindset and a trusting my own body and like doing things that felt right in my body. So a concrete example of that would be alcohol, actually. Like I knew that alcohol, like when I drank alcohol, my stomach would feel worse. Yeah. And I would feel worse. But I convinced myself, because my doctors weren't really talking about alcohol. They would be like, oh, it's the almonds, or like you have like a mini ulcer or something. So I would look towards data rather than going towards like what I knew I needed to do. I just didn't want to admit to myself, which was just like chill out and like drink water and just let my whole system relax. So both of those times were what opened me up to I wouldn't call it spirituality at the time. I would just call it a mindset practice. No one else is going to heal me. I'm going to heal myself. And so I am going to imagine myself as if I am healed. And that is how I'm going to proceed. And that's how I healed myself both of those times. One thing that so I used to suffer from pretty severe depression too. I had some like abuse growing up. And I think that fibromyalgia and the gastritis was probably just a little bit of that like depression and early anger manifesting, and I didn't know how to work it out. So when I was from 2013 to 2015, I was working at Farmed Here, and I was actually like I was finally working at something that felt like I was fulfilling a purpose. So I was happy with that, but there was nothing that was making me feel fulfilled outside of work, and I was really depressed. I remember calling my mom one day, and I was like, should I just like end it? Like I was pretty low. So I had someone that I went to brunch once with. She was talking about ayahuasca, and she was just saying how it had really changed her life. And this was 2015. So, before anyone was, before it was cool,
Yeah.
And so I just Googled like Peru ayahuasca, and to date, my friend and my sacred plant medicine shaman teacher, we think that like it was divine intervention, because I found her on the internet. She's like not searchable. Like she didn't, it wasn't supposed to be searchable. So I sent her this email and she got it, and she's like, oh, I need to talk to this woman because I'm not supposed to be like findable on the internet. So long story short, I went to Iquitos, Peru in 2015, and I did a week of ayahuasca ceremonies, and that was the last time I was ever on antidepressants.
Wow.
Yeah. But for me, I want to make really clear, a lot of the stuff on psychedelics out there is like, I will do one mushroom journey and I'm changed forever. And that was not my case.
Right.
Like, it has been like peeling back an onion and consistently doing the work on myself through plant medicine and through meditation and yoga and my own now spiritual practices, which I have developed. It has not been like one ceremony cured me. That first week in Peru, when I was like in the jungle in a hut, I uncovered a lot of layers of what was beneath my anger and depression, but that was just the beginning of sort of the new like spiritual me. So I continue that practice on like an annual basis, and I work with some other plant medicines to consistently like just be working on myself and like working on my self-love and my self-worth, and getting in like maintaining a heart-centered space, which isn't something that I like grew up with or that's very like natural to me.
So at Summit, Paul Stamets said one of his takeaways from like his psilocybin journey, which I really needed to hear at the time. He was like, all people are mostly good. I tried psilocybin for the first time when I was like 25 on like the 4th of July. And my takeaway was like, I think I was so stifled or just stuck in my own body for so long. And I think that also comes from like childhood things. So a lot of my life has just been learning how to feel into my body because it was so disconnected. And one of my takeaways from that was I can create my own reality just by making like decisions. I know that you talk a lot about how you actually just move so fast that if you had time to think about it, you probably wouldn't do it. But do you have any like major takeaways or anything like you really came to realize from these experiences with these plant medicines?
Yeah. I mean, if there's one way to put it, it's just like love. So sounds very woo, possibly cheesy, but love is always the answer. So like I've spent years working on love for myself with which wasn't like inherent in me. And the more that I like love myself, the happier I am and the better I can relate with others. And frankly, the better my business does, because I don't have like that like deep rooted, I'm not coming at fundraising or I'm not coming at selling with like a deep rooted insecurity, which is not on the surface, but I believe from a feminine energy standpoint that people can feel it.
I agree.
And so I've noticed like the more I work on my self-love and my self-worth, like the better I do. And then that raises the collective, because we don't take psychedelics just so like we can live in a bubble and be some egomaniac. We like take psychedelics so like when we're out in the world, we can like help raise the like
consciousness
vibration of like, like the whole collective.
I have been telling all my friends, I think that we're entering an ascension like collectively, and a part of that is vibration. And I think that if you wake up in the morning and you're kind of hating yourself, that puts you in a low vibe, and then that affects the rest of your day. So self-love is actually really important, even though it does sound cheesy. How have you developed that in yourself?
So it was interesting. When I first started working with psychedelics, I would go to the jungle and work with psychedelics. And then like I would feel really high vibrations for a couple weeks. And then I would get back into my routine, which was like drinking and like kind of, if I can be honest, like complaining and just like not being very healthy. And so what's really made the difference to me is actually not the ceremonies with psychedelics. It is, as my teachers say, it's like the work that happens off the mat. And so I have a really strong morning practice. So I wake up, I do neurosculpting shaking. Do you remember that from Summit? It's like when you like shake like an animal and like kind of just like, and that's like shaking all the stuck energy out because we hold that in our bodies. And then I do either one first or second, depending on how I'm feeling, but I do about 20 minutes of yoga and I meditate for about 15 minutes. And my meditation is not traditional meditation. Over the years, it's developed. It's basically a self-love practice, and it's like an affirmation practice. And so it's the first thing I do in the day before I look at my phone. That's the most important thing. I do not look at my phone until I have kind of like done my own self-worth, self-love practice, and that's really made the difference.
And can you tell me about the 5 levels of spirituality?
Yeah. So it's actually not spirit.
Okay.
It's there's this book that's called The Shame That Binds Us, and that sounds negative, but they talk about how there's an emotions pyramid, and shame is at the bottom, and then it's fear and anger. So those are low vibration, low energies, and then on the top is love and like pleasure and connection and joy and contentment and like calm. And so when you are on, so we're going to call it like the lower end of the pyramid and the higher end of the pyramid. So the lower end of the pyramid, the fear, anger, shame emotions, when we're in those like emotional states, we can't be in the top of the pyramid at the same time. And so like think an example is you are with friends and you find yourselves like talking shit. It doesn't feel good. Like you're just doing it. You kind of all subconsciously know it doesn't feel good, and you're not in like the love, joy space. So if you leave that and you go home and you kind of feel gross, like it takes a minute to get out of that. And so for the creators on this, like when we are creative, we are in the high parts of the pyramid. So we're not creating, if we're creating from fear, anger, and shame, like if we are in that space, like that is like kind of, you know, the creation is going to be fear, anger, shame. And so if you think about critics, right? Like I have a lot of people like me, a lot of people don't like me, which is fine. And so when people get really angry at me, they're trying to like shame me, or like they are being creative in their writing piece, but that is coming from like fear, anger, and shame. And so as creators, it's really important to not match that energy. So as creators, like we need to like not only do our own work to stay in the love space, I like to call it, but we also need to make sure that we are mostly surrounding ourselves with other people that are committed to being in the love space, which is where we create from. So like all the best creations come from when we are like in the love space and we feel open, and we're not creating out of shame. We're creating out of like collective love.
Wow, that's beautiful. This is also something I feel like a lot of the things you're talking about are just really relevant in my life and in my brain. So I think this is very valuable.
I want to say actually one more thing about this. So I had a real situation happen recently where I got like, so we just launched this new beautiful product. It is a mezcal alternative. It took 18 months to make, and it has Palo Santo in it. So Palo Santo is a sacred plant. It is grown in Peru and Costa Rica. And it is like known, you know, by many of us to cleanse negative energy. It's used in like most yoga studios in the United States. Like hundreds of thousands of pounds of Palo Santo are imported into the United States. And maybe 5 years ago, it came to the attention of people that a lot of that was not sustainably harvested. So in order to sustainably harvest Palo Santo, you have to have it harvested from dead and fallen trees. And so some people were like cutting down like live trees, and those trees take 30 to 40 years to grow. And so that is like not good for the communities that grow the trees, and that is like really harmful. So I knew I work with Palo Santo, like as you know, I'm like obsessed with plants, and so I'll like burn Palo Santo. And when I say I work with it, I set an intention and I like give gratitude to the Palo Santo stick or the plant I'm working with, and then I really like have sort of a reciprocal exchange of like gratitude for the plant and asking it for its like guidance. And that's how I work with it. And as I was talking about before with smells, I knew that like Palo Santo has this amazing smell. So I started looking for, I was like, okay, how could I, but it was only going to do it like if it was the utmost sustainable thing. So I started looking for a source of Palo Santo that we could make the first edible or drinkable extract out of. And so I took me a long time. So I found, I made a connection with a community in northern Peru that is sanctioned by the Peruvian government to harvest. In fact, they like want them to like have an economy from it. It's this whole forest where there are many dead and fallen trees. The community during COVID, the females in the community didn't have an income source. And so They worked with the women to, the men would harvest the dead and fallen trees, and then the women create these super premium Palo Santo sticks that hadn't been done before. And we actually have a USDA timber permit. That's how close we are. We like to import directly from them. So like I know the community is getting paid actually a really high price for it. And like I know that we have a great reciprocal exchange with them, and we also give back a percentage of the this to their community. We're talking about like buying them books and stuff. We're gonna go visit in September after the rainy season is over.
Was this the social media backlash that you got?
So anyways, I'm saying that because the intentions in the product were really pure, and I wanted to like really solve a problem. Like you tasted it; it tastes closer to alcohol than it does to water, and that's what people want. They do not want some like thing that just tastes like a little bit of water and flavors that they're supposed to put in a drink.
No,
and
that product is amazing.
Like it's mezcal. So what I got in trouble for was we called it mezcal, and it is not mezcal. And I will be the first person to admit when I'm wrong, you know? And so I did. I consulted with some mezcal experts. I had many beverage experts. I had a lawyer, and no one, I don't know if I didn't know this before, and I should have, that mezcal is a protected name. Like champagne.
Okay.
And so there are other non-alcoholic mezcals, and there are other non-alcoholic tequilas, and none of them are actually supposed to use those names. And so when someone told me that we weren't supposed to use the name mezcal, I was like, oh, okay, we made a mistake. Like, so we're redoing the label to not call it mezcal. And it's like, just be very clear that it is inspired by the flavors of a light and spicy mezcal. But it's not like we're not trying to pretend that this is a mezcal from Oaxaca or something. And so what we got very shamed for was just like that, like, I'll just say it. Someone said I was whitewashing mezcal.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because for me, I tried in the pandemic, I kind of just saw that maybe like the Alaskan economy, or also with the environment, I think the future of the Alaskan economy is like maybe not going to be amazing. So I really tried. I was like, I think the answer is tourism. So I tried entering the tourism space. I want a grant. And I was accused like a lot of like colonization, to the point where I was like, I don't even want to touch this. But over the years, I've thought about it a lot. And I think if you really care and if you actually have a connection to the community, then you might actually be the best person to do whatever it is that even you're getting criticized for. So how do you approach that? Because I think I remember seeing that you posted that you were getting criticism or hate, and you felt like you were being silenced. And I think my learnings over the year, it's like, if you care that much, you're always going to make an effort to do things the right way, even if you don't always get it right the first time. How do you kind of approach, like, what's your approach to doing that and like tackling that head on? Because I'm still kind of working on that. I'm like, if I get a little backlash, I really like jump back. But do you have any advice?
Yes. So I think as creators, we are creating from the love space, and we are always going to fail. Like, you cannot stop creating because someone is going to shame you, or because it's the whole thing of like failing fast and keeping going. And I learned a lot from this one. You know, I learned where I made mistakes, and I learned where I really feel like I feel very strongly about like the intention behind this product being good. And I realized that it was touchy to combine the flavors of mezcal, which is a Mexican spirit, with Peru. You know, we use the Palo Santo because it gives that woody flavor and smell. So it was inspired by the flavors. Anyways, so you've got to fail fast and keep going. And what I put on Instagram was that when this happens to you, and it was pretty severe, and I had never gone through that before, you're like, you start asking your experts. So you ask your PR team and you ask your lawyer, like, what should I do? And everyone tells you to be quiet. And to me, that's not what I'm like. And also it felt like you did something wrong. Don't say anything else to make it worse. Mm-hmm. And that didn't feel right. But actually, if I were to advise someone on if that happens to them, the answer is to stay silent, but not because you're going to do something else wrong. It's because you've got to get back up into the love space. Because when something like that happens, it really brings you down. Like, all of a sudden I got fearful, and I felt ashamed, and I felt angry. And I was projecting that on my team, and like anything that I was creating felt like it was created out of like anxiety and low vibrations. And now that I'm on the other side of it, I'm like, oh, the reason that I just should have waited is because I needed to get back into my general space of like creating from my heart and creating something that is of service to other people rather than creating something out of shame. So I think it's very important for creators. You know, if you're creating, like, you're always going to make a mistake. There's no way. If you don't make mistakes, then it means you're like probably creating out of fear.
Yeah.
And so once you make a mistake, your job as a leader is to do whatever you can to keep yourself in that higher space and to act out of that higher space. And then once you can act out of the higher space, you know, you're like, okay, I did this wrong. I did this right. I'm not going to freak out, and I'm just going to move forward because I'm going to make more mistakes. And you just can't let it bring you down.
Okay, I really love that. I feel like you have been talking about a lot of things, because this last year for me has been, I think, a lot of like low vibe or just not wanting to create out of fear. And it's been me like trying to pick myself up. And I think I'm finally at a place where I'm like, oh, okay, I can, you know, do a podcast or ask Megan to do a podcast with me. So I think this is very helpful advice.
Thank you. I hope so.
Okay, one more thing. And that is your astrology. When did you get into astrology?
So now we're going to go way out there.
So how did you get into it, and kind of how has it guided your life?
So it has been only in the past. I've always been interested in it. One of my college roommates, her mother is Susan Miller of Astrology Zone, who's like a famous astrologer. And so I like just sort of knew of it and would read my horoscope and like my baseline. And I will like only date people if they're like in the signs that are compatible with me.
Really?
Yeah. But that I didn't know that much about it. And then I sat next to Celia Chen, who was my friend and was working with me. We did this like event in Venice, and I was sitting near this woman, Jen Hirsch, and she was the money astrologer that I was telling you about. And I've worked with a ton of like healers and therapists and all the things throughout my life. And so I will try anything. So I had a session with Jen, and basically so it wasn't like, it's a holistic approach. So she looks at your sun and your moon and your rising signs and tells you, like, astrologically speaking, like, if you lean into these qualities of yours, this is how you will excel in the world. It's not like a specific, like, okay, do this kind of podcast or whatever. This is how you're going to make money. So I'm a Sagittarius. And, you know, she kind of affirmed what I thought I knew, which is I'm on this earth to, like, bring joy and play to others, and, like, really, you know, whatever I do has to be in service of that. And then I moved to Miami. We're in Miami right now, because I asked her to do my astrocartography, which is charting. It's like a math thing. You chart your date and time and place of birth, and the astrologer can tell you where on the map like you would thrive.
I should do this.
And so yeah, you should actually. So I was bouncing in between LA and New York last year, and I love both of it, and I have great friends in both places, but I wasn't feeling like it was great for me. I didn't feel settled in either place. And so I was sick of being indecisive. And then I thought, okay, I'm going to ask Jen, because everything she said has come true. And so she told me. And then I moved to Miami the next month. And she also called she called the crisis on the launch.
Really?
She told me in advance. She didn't tell me what was going to happen. She just said that there was going to be April and May 2023 were going to be the hardest months of my life. And I was like, how could that happen? I'm launching like my dream product. Like, that's not possible. I'm moving to Miami. She's like, oh no, you've got some stuff coming. And so it was helpful that she said that, because I knew that I had not done something wrong. You know, also, we're not the center of the universe. No one is. So like, it's all like happening for a reason, but that very much helped me. So then I would call her and I'd be like, okay, this is harder than I thought it was. Like, seriously, I'm supposed to go through this. But I knew that I was going through this hard thing. And she told me it was kind of a test to see if I could do it. And now that it's June, I feel like I am kind of my own medicine woman or something.
Wow.
Like, I feel like I really went through it. And some other things happened with my family too that I would prefer not to talk about. But I went through, like, it was like getting hit from both sides for 2 months. And now just think, if you're listening to this and you're in that space of like, you just like nothing is going right, like you are like learning lessons and you are getting stronger and you will get out of it. And when you get out of it, you have like all these lessons that like just helped you like super level up.
I completely agree. Okay, and my last question is, what manifestations do you want to bring into the world?
Ooh. I mean, I feel like everyone would be so much happier if they focused as much on their feminine energy as their masculine energy every day. Like, I feel like a world would be so happy if we were all really trusting our intuition, and we'd all feel so much more confident in ourselves. And then, like, a world where everyone is like meeting each other in the love space, we would all just be so much happier.
I love that. Okay, thank you so much for being on my podcast.
Thank you, Annemarie. I'm so happy we finally
That
did
was amazing.
this. Thank you.